Hey, Impact students, adult leaders, parents, college students, whoever you are, thanks so much for taking some time to check out at least a few moments of this video. This is something I've thought about doing for quite some time. I just thought it might be helpful to some of you who are unable to come to Wednesday Night Impact to know what we talk about. Maybe you're a high school or middle school student that had some kind of a schedule conflict that you just couldn't come this week. Maybe you're a college student and you're miles away from home, and that gives you an opportunity to kind of connect back to your youth group and know that we care about you and we love you. Or maybe you're a parent and so you don't attend Wednesday Night Impact, but you'd like to know what your students are hearing about and what we're talking about. And this is your way to do that. Last night, we started a new series called Pause, and I started the lesson by asking kind of a strange question. What is most important to a fish? Interesting question, I know. And probably an easy answer, really. I would suggest to you that the most important thing to a fish is water. That water is a part of everything for a fish. It dominates its life. In fact, I would suggest to you that water is such a big part of a fish's life that it almost doesn't even know it's there. It just kind of takes it for granted. And that a fish probably isn't really going to make a big deal about water until you take it out of water. And all of a sudden, water has become very important to it. Now, why would I ask this question? What's this have to do with our lesson for tonight? What we're going to talk about over the next few minutes, well, it's so obvious. It's like water to a fish, and yet it might be so obvious that you don't even really consider it. You just look past it. You just take it for granted. Especially, if you've been in church very much at all. What we're going to talk about tonight, or over the next few minutes, I should say, you've heard it before. It's not new information to you, but you might be missing it, totally missing it. And I would introduce what we're going to talk about just by asking you a similar question, not for a fish, but for you and for me. What is most important to us? Now, not oxygen. I mean, I wouldn't argue against that, but I want to dig a little deeper beyond something physical. And I want to suggest to you that one of the most important things to us is relationship. Our relationships. I wish I could know what you're thinking right now as you hear the word relationships. What names come to your mind? What faces pop in your brain? What are some of the emotions you feel when you think about the relationships in your life? When I looked up the word relationship at dictionary.com, and the word that came up most in the definitions was connection. That if we have a relationship with someone, we have a connection with them. That makes sense. And think of all the ways that we have connections to people. You might have a connection to someone simply because you're in the same family, or because you're in the same school, or you're the same grade, the same class, on the same team, in the same music group, play the same instrument, have the same job, or maybe it's because you have committed together in a friendship over many years, or even in a dating relationship. So you have this connection. Well, consider this thought. Let's say we could just snap our fingers and all of those connections disappear. They're gone. If you ponder that very long at all, you realize that's a horrible thought. Life without relationships is frightening. Loneliness is something we all fear and I would all despise. Why? Because relationships, they add value to our life. They add meaning to our life. In fact, I would say they add meaning and value to every part of our lives. If there's an activity you're involved in that isn't somehow connected to a relationship at some level, I would say you won't do that very long. At some point, that activity will become empty for you and unfulfilling, and you'll walk away. Now, I know this to be true in my life. I would have to admit to you, in some ways, I'm terrible at relationships. I mean, I can get along with people, but where I lack is giving relationships the time it takes. That relationships require presence. They require being available. And sometimes I just get too busy trying to do things. trying to do things to be successful in my work or in my family or in my school or whatever I'm doing, and forgetting the fact that I just need to be available and be present. And so I find that the things I do over time do become unfulfilling, and I have to find a way to connect it back to relationships so I can find meaning in those things. I would suggest to you that the skill of building and maintaining and investing in healthy relationships is the most important skill in life. More important than everything else you could know or learn. And we all know, and we learn a lot of things, that our ability to connect with other people in a healthy way will affect our success in life more than anything else. Well, it's not surprising, really. I mean, it's what the Bible tells us. I mean, the Bible is a story about relationships. Now, the series we're doing, it's really not a series about relationships. We're going to do a series about relationship. We want to consider what the Bible tells us about the possibility of having a relationship with our Creator. I wonder what you think when I just mentioned that again, maybe you're here and you've been in church a lot, and you know that the Bible talks about that we can have a relationship with our Creator. And you maybe have even experienced that relationship, or maybe you've experienced it and now you're not experiencing it, and you feel a little guilt and shame as I mentioned that. Or maybe you're new to church and you've never heard about the possibility of being able to connect with your Creator. And maybe you're even skeptical of it. But could you just take a moment, no matter what your immediate thoughts are, could you just take a moment and could you consider what it would be like if you actually could connect to your Creator? Even if you're skeptical of it, it ought to make you just a little bit in awe. It ought to be kind of a wow moment. That's the story of the Bible, even from the very beginning, that God created us to have a relationship with Him and have a relationship with each other. And some of the most beautiful passages in the Bible, some of the most treasured passages in the Christian faith from the Bible talk about relationship. And the idea that we can have a relationship with God. Just a couple I want to remind you of. And if you have time, look these up. Jeremiah, the book of Jeremiah, has a couple different passages that remind us about relationship. Now, Jeremiah was a prophet in the Old Testament. He was basically a spokesperson for God. God used him to speak to the nation of Israel. And here are a couple verses. This one's in Jeremiah chapter 1. Hear the relationship in this verse. I knew you before I formed you in your mother's womb. Before you were born, I set you apart and appointed you as a prophet to the nations. You hear the relationship there. Later, in Jeremiah chapter 29, verse 11, this is not God speaking directly to Jeremiah. This is God speaking to the nation of Israel. And the Old Testament really is just one big long story of God's relationship with a particular people, the nation of Israel. And this is what God speaks to those people. For I know the plans I have for you. They are plans for good and not for disaster, to give you a future and a hope. Do you hear the relationship in that? Another Old Testament passage, this would be found in Psalms. Psalms 139, and I would encourage you to take some time and read the entire psalm here. I don't have time to give it all to you, but I want to read just a few verses, and I want you to hear the relationship in this. This is David writing, singing even maybe. O Lord, you have examined my heart, and you know everything about me. You know when I sit down or stand up. You know my thoughts, even when I'm far away. You see me when I travel and when I rest at home. You know everything I do. You know what I'm going to say, Lord, even before I say it. Scary thought. You go before me and you follow me. You place your hand of blessing on my head. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me and too great for me to understand. Skipping down, how precious are your thoughts about me, O God. They cannot be numbered. I can't even count them. They outnumber the grains of sand. In the last two verses of Psalms 139. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. Point out anything in me that offends you, and lead me along the path of everlasting life. Do you hear the relationship there? We find the same kind of verses in the New Testament. We go all the way to the book of John. And this is Jesus speaking. And this is another passage I would encourage you to go to John chapter 15 and read all of John chapter 15 and hear the relationship. I'm just going to read for you a verse. This is Jesus talking. Remain in me, and I will remain in you. For a branch cannot produce fruit if it is severed from the vine, and you cannot be fruitful unless you remain in me. Yes, I am the vine, you are the branches. Those who remain in me and I in them will produce much fruit. Relationship. And there's just one more passage, and this is the Apostle Paul speaking, and this is him speaking about how he values the relationship that he has with his Creator. This is Philippians chapter 3, and this is in verse 8. Yes, everything else is worthless when compared with the infinite value of knowing Christ my Lord. For his sake, I have discarded everything else, counting it all as garbage so that I could gain Christ. These people really believed they could have a connection with their Creator. They really believed they could have a relationship. Now, what if I were to snap my fingers and all those verses disappeared? All the verses in the Bible that talk about relationship with God. And not only does it disappear from the Bible, but let's say it disappears from our memory. We don't have any knowledge of it anymore. What are we left with? You know, if you've experienced relationship with God, that would frighten you. Because you know what we're left with is just like instructions about how to live, what to do, what not to do, or how to engage in religious activity. But we're left with just religion. We're left with just lifeless, worthless religion without any context of having a relationship with our Creator. So that's what we're going to talk about in this series. First, just taking time to consider that we can be connected to our Creator in relationship. And then, as the weeks go on, we'll talk about how we do that. But for tonight, I just wanted us to reflect on, and maybe even be in awe of the fact, even the possibility, that we could know God, and that He could know us, and that we could love God, and we could be loved by God. You know, we ought to just be kind of still and contemplate that and consider that before we just rush on. We ought to maybe pause. And as I said in the beginning of my lesson, I'm not very good at relationships sometimes because I don't pause. I don't give people my presence as much as I should. I'm not available as much as I should because I'm so busy doing things. And isn't that true for you too? I mean, especially when it comes to relationship with God, you find yourself so busy doing things that you forget to pause so that you can be available to Him and so that you can be in His presence. So I would challenge you this week to take some time to do that. Just take time to consider that you can do that. So in this first lesson, we're really not talking about how to do that. We're really not talking about religious activities that you might do, like prayer or Bible study or going to church. We don't want to rush to that because we don't want to miss just the opportunity to have a connection. And we don't want to rush to religious activity so that we can feel good about ourselves and what good Christians we are. And we just want to recognize that every religious activity only has value if it helps us connect to God and our Creator in a deeper way. You know, in fact, our religious activity only allows us to connect with God because he has allowed it. And that really what maintains the connection with God is our dependence upon him for everything. Water to a fish. Especially our connection and our dependence on him for salvation. That we were born in rebellion against God. It's called sin. And it destroyed our relationship with him. And yet God, through his Son, Jesus Christ, paid the ultimate price. He faced the consequences of our rebellion so that relationship could be restored and renewed. So let's just take some time this week to pause, to seek God, to recognize the wonderful privilege of being able to be known by him and to know him, to be loved by him, and in response, to love him. Thanks for taking time to listen to this. So look at the screen. I've taken about 16 minutes of your time, and I hope it was 16 minutes that was worth your time. And I hope that if possible, you can be here next Wednesday and see what we learn next about seeking God and pausing before him. And if you can't be here, the video hopefully will be here. And hopefully we'll get some positive feedback from this, and this will be a good thing that we can continue doing. Let me pray for you, and we'll close up our time together. Dear Lord, I pray for anyone who is listening or watching this video, that they would be blessed by the truth that comes from you, not from me. And I pray for any individual watching this that they would take some time to pause and to consider the wonderful opportunity that we have to be able to connect with you, to know you, to be known by you, to love you, and to be loved by you. In my prayer. Amen. Have a great week, and I'll see you soon.